I'm Cherylanne Skolnicki, and this is Brilliant Balance, the show for working women who are ready to shine. Each week, I bring you ideas, inspiration, and insight on balance, business, and getting it all done gracefully. You ready? Let's be brilliant. This is episode 230 of the Brilliant Balance podcast. Why is my child's room always a mess? So hello, my friends. As we get started today, I want you to think back to what your childhood bedroom looked like. And I want you to really picture it. When I ask myself that question, I actually have 3 different images that come to mind from different phases of my childhood. The first room that I remember was a Holly Hobby themed room. I mean, my gosh, has anyone even heard of Holly Hobby today? But that was the very first theme that I can recall. There was a room that later had red and white gingham, and it even had a red rug. Red, like bright red carpeting in that room. That same room later took on an entirely different look when I insisted on having a pull-out sofa instead of a bed to save room in the room. And I thought this was such a genius idea. If we just had a small pull-out sofa, I could have more room in that bedroom. And how great would it be to just sleep on a pull-out sofa every night? I do not recommend this, but at the time I really thought it was a genius idea. And actually, I guess it's 4 because I added the Holly Hobby one, which was really early on. But I also later, when I was growing up at home in high school, my parents built an addition on our home, and that added a bedroom, and I got that bedroom. And that room, the big highlight was having a brass bed. Anybody remember that in the 80s and 90s, that notion of like the brass headboard? And I had a vanity that was brass, and I thought it was very fancy in that room. So I was thinking back to all of my childhood bedrooms, and one theme in those rooms in my life is that they were pretty much always neat. I think that my neatness goes way back to childhood. I mean, a kid level of neat, right? But I really was always a person, a child who appreciated having things in order. I didn't have siblings, so I didn't have to fight with them about where things were kept. And that's kind of always been my MO. But I had lots of friends whose rooms we would be in that were full of happy clutter, what I call happy clutter. And I know some of you were probably a messy Bessie growing up. Maybe remember that term, messy Bessie. Or maybe you're raising one now. You know, maybe as you are now a parent and you look at how your children keep their rooms, there's one or more children whose rooms just can't seem to stay in order. It is such a common refrain among moms, the moms that I coach at least, to talk about, you know, what am I going to do about this kid's room that is just always a mess? And I want to reassure you, this really does happen to children of all ages and candidly to adults. There are some adults who just are very comfortable in a level of clutter and some of us who are not. And it definitely raises different levels of concern among parents. But it really can be one of those ongoing sources of conflict that I think we'd love to eliminate and at least not have it be a fight all the time in the house. So I thought it might be a good topic to shed some light on, have a little perspective on this. And I want to share a couple of things with you today. The first thing is really, whose problem is it? And that is not as obvious an answer as it might seem. And then the second is, why does it keep happening? You know, why is it sort of a chronic problem? And based on the answer to that question, it sort of leads us down different paths around what we might do about it. Okay? So in terms of whose problem is it anyway, right? Is it your problem as a parent or their problem? I want you to really think about who is stressed by these circumstances of clutter. Because if the child is stressed, that's one thing. Right? In other words, they don't want it to look that way. They don't want it to feel that way. They're sort of irritated by it or agitated by it, but they don't really know what to do about it. That is one sort of interesting dynamic that I think you want to pay extra attention to, because they're sort of raising their hand maybe in an odd way and saying, you know, this is a place where I need some help. This is a task that I'm not managing well independently, but I'm kind of unnerved by the results I'm getting. And I do really want some help here. So if your child is stressed about the disarray in their room, that's one thing. But if you are the only one who is stressed, it's kind of a different challenge, isn't it? Because really, this might be your child telling you, I am delighted by this wonderland that I have created. All of my things, my treasures are in here, and I like it this way. And I don't know why you need it to be different, right? And that is very important distinction, because if it is your discomfort only and not theirs, then you might want to consider the benefits of letting them have some level of control over their space. And so I'm going to talk about that in a minute. And look, it is fair to set a minimum standard. We were talking about this among the coaches on my team, things like food, trash, wet towels, or laundry in general. That might be the minimum standard of those things have to make their way out. Nothing that causes a biohazard, right, that we want left in that room. But there may be a slightly different approach if this is a difference in style. And we want to give our kids some things that they can control, where they can be in charge, and because they have very few areas where that's true. So I want you to maybe, as we get into this episode, check in with yourself and really think about that kid, the one who I'm always on them about their room. Are they unhappy, or is it just me? And I want you to really be honest about that before you listen to these other ideas, because it might change the approach that you want to take. Okay. So the next piece of this is, why does this keep happening? Why, when we maybe do restore order at some point, does it continue to devolve, right, into a level of disarray? And what do we do about it in each circumstance? So first circumstance is the one I already started poking at a little bit, and that is the child actually prefers it that way. You may find that this quote unquote problem keeps repeating itself because your child is actually really happy with what it's like. I called it happy clutter before. It's treasures. It's their own space with their own stuff, and they love it. And they may not always be able to find things, but they know they're in there somewhere, and they're sort of surrounded by things that bring them joy and make them feel a sense of control and feel like they are in their own space. The rest of your house might look the way you want it to, right? It might be more aesthetically driven versus usefulness driven. And to them, they may just really like being surrounded by all of these things that they can play with and that they remember where they acquired, and it has, maybe some level of sentimental significance to them, even if it's as simple as, remember when we went to that trampoline park and got these socks, and I remember I was there with this friend and it was such a great day. And they see those socks and that's what they're thinking about. And you see those socks and think, oh my God, throw them out already, right? It's just a very different experience with the items that are in their room. So if your child is really happy, and if they've met that minimum standard where there's no food rotting in the corners, there's no wet towels molding on the floor, there's no trash overflowing, right? Things are sort of safe in there. They've gotten the laundry to where it needs to be, but there's still a level of clutter. You might want to consider letting this be a room where they are in charge and just shifting your focus to the shared spaces of your home. So the approach there might look like, hey, this is not how I would keep the room if I were living here, but as long as you're meeting these kind of agreements, like I was mentioning before, we'll just keep the door closed, and it's your space. You can do with it what you want. And if you want some help changing it around or getting rid of some stuff, like periodically we'll do that. But this is your kingdom to keep the way you are comfortable keeping it. Okay? So that's kind of, I'm starting maybe not in the place you would expect me to start, but that is an approach that can be very effective. Different than second reason why this problem might keep repeating itself. And this is, if there is no place for everything, then nothing is ever in its place. Okay, because it doesn't have one to go back to. So I love the phrase, a place for everything and everything in its place. It's kind of a governing mantra in our home. Okay, I very much will ask the question, where does this live? I'll pick up an object. Where does this live? And generally speaking, people should know where this object lives because then it can go back there to its home inside of our home, which is probably in a place that it's not on display, wreaking havoc. So their rooms need to be a microcosm of that, right? If you want to keep a room in order, there has to be a place for everything, and then the things have to be in their place. So that might look like reducing the sheer amount of stuff that you're trying to get in that room. Because I think what happens with a lot of kids' rooms is they are overloaded, right? They've crammed everything they've acquired and that they own in there, and the space is just too small for it to be neatly organized. There's just no way for it to have a place, so it's kind of spilling out everywhere. So reducing the sheer amount of stuff is one approach you might want to take, or changing where things live. So some of the things that they have in their room might be better suited to a playroom, or the basement, or to storage temporarily, or the garage. So just thinking about, are we overloading this space, and could we get some relief automatically just by having fewer items in there? Do you ever find yourself saying, I just need a minute to breathe? While the whole idea of meditation can sound totally intimidating, I've found that stepping away from the chaos of life, even just for a few minutes, is incredibly restorative. So if you're short on time, but could use a few moments of peace right about now, listen to my 5-minute meditation for working moms. It'll help you clear your head and come back to your day feeling centered and refreshed. Head over to brilliant-balance.com/breathe. Press play and settle in for a few mini moments of peace right now. Another approach for this one is to help them create a system so that they know what done looks like. What does it look like when everything is in its place, right? And this is probably not a project that most kids can do on their own. Even if you're dealing with teenagers, if they haven't really built this skill yet, they might need some help. So this looks like the organizing process, right? It looks like figuring out, okay, how much stuff can we keep in here? Where is it going to live? These things are living in drawers. These things are living in cubbies. These things are living in the closet. These things are living in storage under the bed, right? These are on the bed, and that's their home. It's where the stuffed animals live. Sort of helping them create a system, maybe even going so far as to take photographs of what it looks like when it's done so that they know what they're trying to get back to, right? Labels work great here. So kids who want to keep stuff in order but can't quite figure out where it goes, if you have cubbies or bins and they're labeled, like they would be in a classroom, and then they know, okay, this is where these go, and this collection goes here and hairbands go here and whatever. So when you kind of sort things into piles first, it might be obvious we've sort of built collections of that need to be stored, and those need places to go. They need baskets or bins or drawers where they can be collected. One of my favorite things I ever remember doing in this with my kids is both of my girls had hair bow phases, big, giant hair bows that they wore clipped in. And we had tons of them, so many different colors, and I loved them. But there got to be a lot. And so we had these belts that could hang vertically, like, belts they would wear around their waist. And the hair bows just clipped onto the belts, and they sort of made like a decor item for a while in their rooms. So things like that just help to collect objects so that they're not all over the place can be really, really helpful. A place for everything and everything in its place. Another reason why you might find that you're kind of repetitively in this situation where kids' bedrooms are messy is if there's no process to keep things in order, right? So once you determine where things live and you have that kind of buttoned down, there needs to be a process to stay that way. And without that process, it will just sort of, it'll veer off track over time, and you'll just, again, chronically find yourself in this argument. So process might look like a daily process to what I call tidy up the nursery. If you think about Mary Poppins and that game of tidy up the nursery, just a daily quick process. I'm talking about 5 minutes to get the food out. If there's food that's migrated in there, maybe that doesn't happen in your house, but it definitely happens in mine. Trash, any kind of trash that needs to be removed, wet towels, chronic offenders, right? Laundry, things that have gotten out of their home that you designed for them, 5 minutes max to just get that stuff back to baseline. That is a process that's preventive in nature. It can be very, very effective. And then a weekly process to really get things truly back to baseline can be very, very effective. So I would recommend that you think about, after that daily 5-minute process, maybe about once a week. And you can make this wherever it makes sense. It could be Sunday evening before the week starts. It could be Friday after school before they can get into all their fun stuff, whenever it makes sense, Saturday morning, where maybe you take 20 minutes. If you've been doing that daily quick cleanup, to just do a little bit of the next level. Maybe we've let some crayons and coloring books stay out, or maybe we've let a pile of clothes kind of build up that has not been put back on hangers and whatever. It might take another 20 minutes once a week to really get the things that have been used back where they belong. And depending on the ages of your kids, those might flip a bit. So if you have really young kids who are playing in there a ton with a lot of stuff, you might need a little bit longer on the daily process. And then that might help you not need as long on the weekly tidy, right? If your kids are a little older, they're managing things pretty independently, they're probably going to do that daily process on their own over time. And then you may want to be involved for that weekly process of just kind of making sure stuff goes back where it belongs. And then I also think it's probably unrealistic not to still have a monthly or a quarterly purge day where you together decide what stays and what goes. What sort of migrated into the room but really needs to be elsewhere. What have we bought that's new that now needs a home and maybe it's just kind of floating? What do we not need anymore, right? It's run its course, that season's over, that sport is over. We don't really need to have those things laying around. So that monthly or quarterly purge day can be really helpful to get things cleared out and kind of keep it fresh in their rooms. So that all falls under process, right? So if you do find a place for everything and you have those things in their place once, that daily, weekly, monthly process of getting things back to baseline can be the missing link, right? If you know you've done this once, why are we still in this problem? You might want to look at process. And then the last one I would look at is, if you are expecting your child to do this independently, it's possible that they are just completely overwhelmed by where to start. And you look at it and think, this is so obvious. I can see where everything needs to go, right? We've kind of talked about this before. But depending on how your child is developing with regard to executive function, like that skill of planning and ordering things and putting things into steps, they may be overwhelmed by this, especially at young ages, but don't get tricked into thinking that older children can do this naturally. Really depends on the child. So I think doing it with them is probably the most compassionate thing we can do, right? Kind of rolling up our sleeves, keeping this fun, and aiming for visible progress. So if you walk into a room that's like a disaster area, and we all have them, and they get to that place, you don't want to deal with things like in the depths of the drawers, because who cares? You can't even see it. You really want to start with visible progress. What's the stuff that's on the floor, on the surfaces, blocking the bed, so that you can really help that child feel a sense of progress quickly, because that progress will build momentum. Okay, so I love things like, and I hear these all the time in our coaching community as ideas that people crowdsource, like setting a timer and saying, we're just going to do this for 15 minutes and see how far we get. Or saying we're going to do it for 2 songs, right? We'll listen to 2 songs on Spotify and we'll just kind of dance our way through the process for 2 songs and we'll see how far we get. And often, just by starting, you build that little bit of momentum that gives them the energy to keep going, right? And you can actually get farther. I think when you're going to roll up your sleeves and participate, attitude is everything, right? Trying to remember, it's just stuff. And it may not be mission critical to make a giant deal out of this all the time. If we can stay a little bit lighthearted about it and model what order looks like elsewhere in the house, right? And model these processes to have a place for everything and everything in that place, right? And the processes to keep things in order, like the kind of daily tidy up and the weekly back to baseline process, then they have something to grab onto in their own space. They can mimic what they see you doing elsewhere in the house in their space over time. So rolling up your sleeves and teaching them how to do it in their space is an act of compassion, right? It's great modeling, and it really will help you get the initial result that you're looking for. And then praising them and coaching them through keeping up with it over time can be very empowering. They're going to need reminders, right? No matter what the age, they're going to need reminders on these different processes, but they will build habits over time that are just so rewarding when you see it starting to happen as a parent. A messy room isn't the biggest parenting challenge that you're going to face. But it can definitely be a chronic irritation. And so with just a little bit of thought here, an opportunity to hit the reset button, I think you and your child can be feeling a whole lot better. I know these are the very same processes that we use in my house. We use them in our coaching community with our clients. And so I hope they are helpful to you as well. That is all for today, my friends. Until next time, let's be brilliant.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.